Do you have the courage to camp in the forest at night? Imagine sitting around a campfire, enjoying the peacefulness of nature until a piercing scream shatters the night. Darkness surrounds you, and something is silently watching from the trees. From stealthy footsteps circling the tent, eerie messages in the dead of night, to terrifying encounters with unseen forces, these are real stories that will send shivers down your spine. Have you ever experienced a terrifying night in the wilderness? Or are you brave enough to try? Brace yourself, because after this video, you may never want to sleep in the woods again. Story 1. The Mysterious Sound in the Lost Time. Tom and his son Jake were nature enthusiasts. They often spent their weekends camping and exploring the wilderness. One day, they decided to try a new location, a remote forest that few people knew about. Rumors surrounded this land, tales of mysterious disappearances, but Tom wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. He just wanted to have a memorable trip with his son. They set out early in the morning, bringing all the necessary gear. After hours of driving and hiking through the forest, they found a flat area near a small stream to set up their tent. The air was cool, the trees whispered in the wind, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Jake eagerly started a fire while Tom prepared their food. Everything went smoothly, just like their previous camping trips. But as night fell, an eerie sensation crept into the air. When the sun disappeared behind the trees, an unsettling silence took over the forest. No more birds chirping, no insects buzzing, just complete stillness. Tom noticed that Jake was growing uneasy. "Something's not right, Dad," the boy whispered. Tom nodded, trying to reassure him, but even he felt that something was off. As night deepened, they sat by the fire, trying to relax with jokes and stories. But around 10 p.m., strange sounds emerged. At first it was faint, like dry leaves being crushed underfoot. Then the sounds became clearer, slow, deliberate footsteps echoing through the woods. Tom tensed up, looking around, but saw nothing beyond the darkness. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing noise rang out, like the sound of wood snapping, but something about it was unnatural. It was too loud, too powerful, as if an enormous tree had fallen. But nothing had actually fallen. Then came another sequence of noises, a strange rhythm, as if something heavy was being dragged across the ground. The sounds grew closer. Jake trembled and grabbed Tom's arm. "Dad, I'm scared." Tom immediately stood up, pulling out his survival knife. "Who's there?" He called out, but only silence responded. A few seconds later, the noises resumed, but now they weren't coming from a single direction. They surrounded them, as if something was circling their campsite at an inhuman speed. Then Tom saw something that sent chills down his spine. At the edge of their campsite, just beyond the firelight, was a shadow, darker than the surrounding night. It had no distinct shape, but Tom felt it watching them. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, as if time itself was slowing down. A strange pressure filled Tom's head, and his vision blurred. Jake staggered as well. "Dad, I feel dizzy." Then everything went black. When Tom opened his eyes, the sun was already up. His head throbbed. His body felt exhausted, as if he had run all night. He turned to see Jake still fast asleep. His watch read 9 a.m., but the last thing he remembered was being awake at around 11 p.m. What had happened during those missing 10 hours? Tom shook Jake awake. The boy blinked, looking confused. "Dad, what happened? I remember the strange noises. Then I just fell asleep." They looked around. The fire had gone out, but the most unsettling thing was the strange markings on the ground, long drag marks, as if something had moved around their tent all night. They couldn't explain what had happened, but one thing was clear: they didn't want to stay another second. On the way back, Tom tried to rationalize everything, searching for a scientific explanation. But deep down, he knew something supernatural had occurred. Had they merely fallen into an inexplicable deep sleep? Or had some force made them lose their sense of time? Whatever the answer, Tom knew one thing for sure: he would never return to that forest again. Story 2. The Night Stalker. In 2020, amid the stresses of life, a man decided to take a break and reconnect with nature. He chose a quiet camping spot in Rocky Mountain National Park, a place known for its dense forests, majestic mountains, and tranquil solitude. With his tent, some food, and a gun for protection, he set off in search of peace. Everything went smoothly during the day. He pitched his tent near a small stream, watched the sunset, and enjoyed the fresh air. As night fell, he lit a small fire, sipped some whiskey, and listened to the sounds of nature. Nothing but the chirping of insects and the gentle rustling of leaves. Everything seemed perfect. Around midnight, while curled up in his sleeping bag, his phone suddenly vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "It's cold tonight. Sleep well." A chill ran down his spine. Who could be messaging him at this hour? His phone had no service in this remote location, so how had the message even arrived? Thinking it might be a prank or a wrong number, he tried to ignore it and go back to sleep. A few minutes later, he heard footsteps outside his tent, the sound of snow crunching underfoot. His heartbeat quickened, and he held his breath. Someone was moving around his campsite. He quietly reached for his gun and shone his flashlight outside, but saw nothing beyond the pitch-black darkness. Another message arrived. When he opened his phone, he saw a new image. It was a photo of his tent, taken from outside. His blood ran cold. Someone was watching him from the shadows. Unable to take it any longer, he sprang up, unlocked his gun's safety, and fired 2 warning shots into the air. The gunshots echoed through the forest, shattering the silence. After that, he heard hurried footsteps retreating into the distance. Then, nothing. Only his pounding heart remained. He stayed awake the entire night, gripping his gun. As soon as the first light of dawn appeared, he hastily packed his belongings and left. On his way out, he noticed footprints around his tent. Some were disturbingly clear, showing that someone had stood silently watching him for hours. When he returned home, he tried tracing the phone number that had sent the messages, but it didn't exist. There were no clues, no leads to follow. To this day, he still doesn't know who was out there, watching him, or what their true intentions were. But one thing is certain, that night, someone stood in the darkness, watching. And if he hadn't been armed, the story might have ended very differently. This serves as a chilling reminder that the wilderness holds more than just wild animals. Sometimes, the scariest thing out there is another person. Story 3: The Scream in the Forest. A group of 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, eagerly prepared for their first camping trip in the woods behind their relative's house in Michigan. The forest wasn't far from the residential area, but because it was dense and rarely visited, it retained a sense of wilderness and mystery. The kids packed a tent, sleeping bags, some snacks, and a deck of Uno cards for evening entertainment. After setting up the tent and lighting a fire, they spent the afternoon exploring the surroundings. Towering oak trees and rustling bushes in the evening breeze filled them with both excitement and a hint of unease. One of the boys, Tommy, joked, "What if we run into Bigfoot?" Everyone laughed, but an inexplicable chill lingered in the air. As night fell, they returned to their campsite, roasting marshmallows and playing Uno around the fire. Ghost stories were exchanged between giggles, momentarily making them forget they were isolated in the silent woods. Around 11 p.m., as the fire began to die down, the group crawled into their tent, preparing for sleep. The night was so quiet that they could hear every rustling leaf whenever a breeze passed through. Suddenly, a sound echoed from the distance. A high-pitched, piercing scream, like a woman in sheer terror. The laughter stopped. They stared at each other, wide-eyed, their hearts pounding. Tommy tried to reassure them. "It's probably just a fox or an owl." But then the scream rang out again, closer this time. It was unlike anything they had ever heard before. Cold, agonized, and desperate, as if someone was crying for help in the pitch-black night. Fear seeped into the group. They held their breath, listening intently to the silence outside. Then came footsteps. At first, they were light, as if someone was creeping cautiously through the dry leaves. But within seconds, they grew rapid, pounding the ground as if something was charging toward their tent. Suddenly, the tent shook violently. A powerful force struck the fabric from the outside, making them scream in terror. Their hearts pounded in their chests. One of the girls, Emily, burst into tears. Tommy fumbled with the tent zipper, ready to bolt, but then he hesitated. What if there really was something dangerous out there? The scream erupted again, this time so close that it made their ears ring. And then, as abruptly as it had started, everything went silent. No more screams, no more footsteps, only the sound of the wind and the distant chirping of crickets. No one dared to move. They clung to each other, trying to steady their breathing. After what felt like an eternity, Tommy finally whispered, "We need to run home, now." No one argued. They scrambled out of the tent and sprinted toward their relative's house, about half a mile away. With every step, they felt as if unseen eyes were watching them from the darkness. When they finally arrived, their family was already on the porch, their faces filled with worry. "Did you hear that?" Tommy's uncle asked, his voice tense. "The scream?" Tommy panted. "Yes! It was right outside our tent." His uncle glanced at the forest, his expression unreadable. Then, in a low voice, he said, "That wasn't the first time we've heard it." A shiver ran down their spines. He explained that over the years, many people had reported the same chilling scream. It always came at night, sometimes near, sometimes far, but no one had ever seen its source. Some believed it was the cry of a lost spirit haunting the woods. Others thought it might be an undiscovered creature. Whatever it was, the group silently agreed they would never return to that forest at night. And even now, whenever they recall that scream, they still feel the icy grip of fear. What seemed like just an ordinary camping trip in nature turned into a terrifying encounter with an unknown force that no one could explain. The haunting screams in the forest, the eerie footsteps creeping around the tent, and the chilling silence that followed. These moments would haunt them forever. To this day, no one knows what appeared that night. Was it a lost soul? An undiscovered creature? Or perhaps it's still there, waiting for the next daring soul to step into the forest after dark. If you ever plan to camp in the wilderness, always remember, sometimes the scariest thing isn't the darkness itself, but what lurks within it. Would you dare spend a night in the deep woods? Comment below.